Hi, Remote Islanders. So today I have my very first interview. Very excited to have Debra Paul-Burgess with me. And she is a remote worker. And she's going to give me a little introduction about herself. And then we'll get started with any questions that I have. So, Debra, thank you so much for being my very first interviewee. I know this is exciting for me, and I'm sure for you as well.
Absolutely. I am very honored. I'm excited and I'm honored to be your first interviewee. I've never done a podcast before, so this is a big first for me, and I'm really delighted.
Thank you. And this is still a first for me too, because we're still learning as we go along with this podcast. So we'll learn together. So can you introduce yourself to my listeners?
Sure. I'm Debra Paul-Burgess. I'm a SEO/content writer from Trinidad. I have been working remotely, I'd have to say off and on. So in my current job, I've been at for 6 months. But I've been doing remote work, I think, since the pandemic was my very first stint in remote working.
Okay. And is that one of the reasons you decided to pursue remote work, because of the pandemic?
It kind of fell into my lap, the opportunity. I was job seeking at the time. Of course, during the pandemic, it was kind of a desert as far as jobs were going. And a friend of mine who has a company, she actually had 2 companies in St. Lucia. This is a university friend of mine. She asked me if I was available. She was looking for a brand and communication strategist.
Okay.
To work remotely from Trinidad. And so I jumped at the opportunity and I did that. It was a bit of freelancing, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So it ended up being only for about 6 months because circumstances on her end and funding and so on. But it was my first stint in working remotely.
Okay. And how did you transition from office life to remote work? Like, were there any challenges that you faced?
I think the number one challenge was discipline, because I would always say that I'm not disciplined enough to work from home.
Right.
I'm very easily distracted. I think it's the same for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. When you're home, somehow you always think of the most random things to do when you should actually be working. Yes. All of a sudden, that laundry that needs to be folded, I think I should do it now.
Yes.
Right? So that was the number one thing. And creating a space that was conducive to focus.
Right.
I think I did that in my guest room.
Mm-hmm.
I had a desk and, I needed to be in a space where I could close the door and I could be focused and it could be quiet and undisturbed.
Sort of mimic an office environment, give you that space.
As close as possible, yeah.
Yes, while in the comfort of your own home. But yes, have that space where you train your mind, this is where I'm going to work from.
Yeah.
I found that very helpful myself. I still get distractions because the kids are home sometimes, so they pop into the room. But it is important to kind of have a space where okay, this is where I go to work. And it kind of gives me a routine as well. I don't know if that has helped you, giving yourself a routine.
Absolutely. That is also important, because I'm usually someone who doesn't like routine. And so imposing a routine on myself was different.
Yes.
But necessary.
Agreed. I totally agree with you. I have found myself making sure I get ready before 9 o'clock to be able to clock in and sit by my desk at 9. I think one of the things a lot of people think remote work is that it's very flexible, but flexible as in you can do anything you want, as opposed to flexible in terms of how you manage your day. What are your thoughts on that?
I love, and this is one of the things that I love about remote work, is that you have the flexibility, but it also comes with, it's kind of like with great flexibility comes great responsibility. So for instance, there have been days where maybe there's an errand that I want to run. Maybe I want to have lunch with a friend. So I might work, get up in the morning, work for 3 hours, 4 hours, and then go off, run my errands, take my time. That might take 2 hours or however long. But I know when I come back, I have to put in the work when I come back.
Right.
But I love the flexibility of feeling like my time is not, yes, it's sort of owned. I have an employer,
right,
who pays for my time, but I can juggle things as I see fit. If I want to work at night,
right,
which would not be the case because I am a morning person, but I'm just saying, if I wanted to spend the day at the beach and then come home at 3 p.m. and put in 8 hours,
right,
then I could do that.
Right.
Of course, depending on the employer or the arrangement, a lot of times you need to overlap with their time zone and their workday at least three or 4 hours.
Yes, that's true.
But outside of that, I mean, that's the beauty of the flexibility. Yeah, you can't do what you want, and especially in my situation, that kind of brings me to, and I guess this was a interesting, it could be a challenge. So at my current job, and this is the first time I encountered this, I'm not sure if you're familiar with different software that's used to monitor remote workers.
Yes.
In my case, the one that we use is called HubStaff.
Right.
And it monitors your activity from the time you log on or you activate it. It monitors your keystrokes, your mouse movement, the apps that you use, the URLs that you visit. And the icing on the cake is that it takes 3 screenshots every 10 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's real monitoring.
It's real monitoring. It's real monitoring. So that was a bit of an eye opener. That was raised my eyebrow when I started, and I was told, this is what's going to happen. No big deal. I mean, I have 2 laptops. And so what I did was my newer laptop, I used it exclusively for work.
Right.
Because I don't want to have a situation where I forget and I check my personal email and something pops. You never know.
Of course.
So I use a separate laptop for my personal stuff. And that works.
Right.
So I have dedicated work. So I'm not tempted. Because you can just have a lapse.
Yes.
And you open something and you go down a rabbit hole.
That is
a personal rabbit hole.
Yes.
And forget that, these screenshots can be seen by your employer.
Of course. So is that flexibility that you have in terms of when you work something that you had to arrange with your current employer, or is that just how everybody else does it? Or what is the...
it's kind of just built in. Like they tell you you're working X number of hours a day. We'd like you to overlap with our workday Eastern Standard Time at least 3 hours.
Right.
And that's it.
Okay.
And in this particular role that I'm in now, I work very independently. I mean, sometimes the whole week would pass and I have not interacted with my boss or my colleagues on the team. Wow. Because everyone is just working independently. And I guess it has to do with the nature of the work, which is writing.
Right.
So we get our assignments. We use for productivity software, we use is ClickUp.
Right.
And we use Slack for communication.
Right.
And there really is no need for us to, I mean, occasionally you might ask a question like, hey, are you having issues with this software because it's not loading or whatever? But other than that, and that's one of the downsides, I think, of remote work. The fact that I initially found it very isolating.
Right.
Because I'm a people person, so I really crave the interaction that you get in the camaraderie in an office.
Yes. And
having coworkers and so there's the plus, the pros and the cons, because of course I don't have to deal with office politics. That's great. That's a big plus.
Yes.
Right. I don't have to deal with that, but I do miss it.
Of course.
But to be honest, now that I've been doing it for some time, I actually asked myself recently because, I get updates from things like Caribbean Jobs about openings that are within my wheelhouse. And I might look at them like, do I want to go back there? Do I want to go back to an office boy?
Totally understand that. There's a conversation you have to have with yourself, that do I really want that office job that good, and a lot goes along with an office job. And I'm not knocking office jobs. It works for some people. I honestly, after being in this for a few years, I'm not sure I can go back to that. And I have a little more rigid structure in terms of I have to log in, I do check in, those kinds of things,
Right.
But one of the things I want to ask in terms of, you mentioned that you get distracted. So how do you, other than setting up your room, how do you deal with distractions? What are your tips for that? If you have any.
I think it's something that I still struggle with, to be honest. I still struggle. I feel like sometimes I have the attention span of a fruit fly. I am very easily distracted. I have a very good friend of mine who's also my neighbor, and she also works from home, and she has a lot more flexibility and free time. And if she comes over, it's all over.
Right.
Like she'll say, I'm sorry, I don't want to disturb you. This is only going to take 2 minutes. And then an hour and a half later, we're talking.
Right.
So it's something that I struggle with still. Tips.
That's okay.
What I do is, I think so that and time management, and I guess they go hand in hand.
Right.
Are two things that I struggle with. Some days I'm good, and then other days I'm not.
Yeah.
But it helps to put timers on. Right. So when I take breaks, I think initially when I started, the plan was that I would not get up. I would spend at least 2 hours of consistent work before I would take a break.
Right.
That doesn't always happen. But it helps to be a lot more mindful of the time and start timers.
Yeah.
So if I have to get up, say maybe somebody comes to my door or my friend comes over, I will put a timer on my phone, or I will tell Alexa, start a 20-minute timer to sort of keep me honest and because you can lose track of time so fast.
That's true. Yes.
Right. So that is one thing that I do. And I don't know, I'm open to more tips.
So leave in the comments what your tips are for avoiding distractions and staying productive. We will review them, and we can probably do an episode on that later on,
Yes.
But I do find it's easy to get distracted because I feel like home is not always conducive to that working mentality, working environment.
Yes.
And it really sometimes, on certain days, like you said, on certain days it's fine and I'm okay. And there are certain days that it is more of a struggle to get things done. What I have found very helpful, because I'm a list maker and the nature of my job, I have certain things I need to get done. So I make lists, and I like to write. I physically write it down, right? Yes. So I would, that is one of the tips that I have. I would make my to-do list for the day and make little check boxes and tick them off as I get it done. And then as the day goes on, if I have things to add to it, I do that as well. It really has been helpful, and it also makes you feel really accomplished when you tick everything on your list.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. I think one of the things, and I just thought of this, it's something that I would really like to do more of, is get out of the house.
Okay.
So I have gone to coffee shops and worked, well, not terribly often. Initially, I thought, the first time I did it, I thought, this is fantastic. I need to do this once a week. Get out of the house.
Yes.
Because there are times when working from home, and especially when because I'm an empty nester. So I live alone. And there are days when I don't set foot out of my apartment.
Yeah.
I get up in the morning, I get ready, I work. I might work late. And then I just go to bed.
And do it again the next day.
Do it again the next day. So I have to really make an effort to get out of the house. And I really liked the coffee shop that I went to Full Bloom.
Mhm.
I wish there were more. I think Trinidad is becoming more of a coffee shop culture, which is
Yes.
good.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's good to try and find the ideal setting for yourself.
Yes.
I like Full Bloom, but I don't like the interior. It tends to be noisy.
Right.
There aren't enough plugs. So it's like, okay, if I don't get the spot that I like outside, then I'm kind of stuck. And
Yes.
then if there's no plug, I only have 2 hours on my laptop.
Mm-hmm.
So it can get a little tricky.
It's logistics.
Yes. So I think what I could do and I should do is probably just kind of shop around.
Yes.
I've tried Starbucks, freezing cold.
Yes.
Um,
Starbucks is very busy. I haven't done remote work there, and it's very difficult for me because I'm client facing, so I do
Right.
have a lot of meetings, right?
Yeah.
And I find Starbucks to be distracting just because it's very busy, you know?
Yeah. I think it has to be, for me, leaving and working from a coffee shop, it really depends on the nature of the work I'm doing.
Right,
So there's
exactly.
certain things where I need more focus,
Mhm.
and this is the next thing, I have 2 screens.
Right,
It has to be something that I don't need 2 screens.
right, exactly.
Because I cannot go back to one screen. I don't know how to do that.
I have a monitor as well that's right behind my laptop, so I totally understand.
Yeah. So there's certain kinds of tasks that
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, I can do this at the coffee shop.
Right.
So I'd have to plan it like that. Like,
Yes.
okay, I'll save this for the day that I'm going to work from outside.
Got it. So as we're talking, I know one of the things that I struggle with is burnout and feeling that burnt out feeling. It is something I've had to manage in terms of making sure I get up and take breaks. Have you experienced burnout in your remote career?
I have, not this job, but my previous job.
Right.
So I currently work as a content writer for an agency in the US.
Right.
Prior to this, I worked as a content writer for a company in Portugal.
Right.
And this is one of the things too I was planning to mention as sort of a challenge when it comes to remote work is adapting to different work cultures.
Yes.
So with the Portuguese company tended to be very, I had burnout there because it was a lot of work.
Okay.
Tight deadlines.
Right.
Everything was due yesterday. I worked very long hours, and I definitely felt the burnout.
Yes.
I didn't feel like I had enough work-life balance when I was in that job. Whereas now, I think the American work culture tends to be a little more informal. It's a little more casual.
Laid back.
It's laid back.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working a lot more independently than with the previous company. And my boss tends to be a little more warm and fuzzy. So she's always trying to, I think particularly because on my team, there are 5 of us currently. 3 are based in the US.
Right.
I'm in Trinidad, and then there's a guy in Brazil.
Okay.
So we're a little spread out, and nobody's, even the ones based in the US are not in the same state.
Okay.
They're in 3 different states. And so she tries really hard to develop connections with each of us. So we have one-on-ones every 2 weeks, every other week.
Right.
The one-on-one, it's very casual. She asked me 2 questions. How's work? How's life?
Right.
Those are the 2 questions she asked me every time. Right? And it's really just a way to connect, like I said, because we work so independently, and to make us feel like, our boss, our manager cares about us, and she wants to make sure that we're comfortable and there aren't any issues or challenges that go unresolved or unaddressed.
Yes.
Right? So, that this job, I definitely don't feel the burnout, which is great.
Good.
So all I need to battle with is the managing the time and the discipline and
Right.
staying on task.
Of course, feeling isolated, because you mentioned that, and it's something when we met, and I should probably give my listeners a little idea of how we met. We met at an event for Karen Rose, who is the digipreneur, and he introduced us because I mentioned to him I wanted to start this podcast. And when we spoke, you mentioned you feel isolated as a remote worker. And it is something that is very real, something that we don't talk about a lot. How do you deal with that in terms of like connecting with your team? Well, I know you say your friend drops over or you're trying to go to coffee shops, but in terms of connecting with your co-workers, how do you manage that?
That is something, I think that is a work in progress.
Okay.
I have been making suggestions to my boss about ways that we could try and have more of a connection.
Right.
And she agreed. She thought it was a great idea. And well, I think everyone just gets really busy.
That's true.
Because I think there was one time, very impromptu, we ended up having a chat, all five of us in the team.
Right.
And it was hilarious. We were talking, I don't know what we were talking about, but it just turned into this really funny banter. And I said, oh my gosh, we need to do more of this.
Yes.
Could we have a day where we do games? And my boss said, there was a time I had that idea to do like a games day. And she said, we'll definitely look into that so that we can have more,
yes,
non-work interaction,
yes.
Something that's fun. Now, the company has on Slack, we have a channel they call, what is it called? The Nebula, which is really for everybody. Now, of course, the company is, again, it's international. So it's based in the US, but we're from everywhere. I think they last all hands meeting, they said it was 100 countries, a lot of countries.
Wow. Okay.
A lot of countries. And so the Nebula is supposed to be this place where we post fun things. So they will encourage people to post, especially on a Friday. And
yes.
It's Friday, share something fun, share something. So people will post pictures of their cats, their dogs, their vacations, events that they went to, just any and everything. Unfortunately, I don't really have the luxury and the time to go. And so I miss a lot. Like every so often, a couple of weeks will pass and I'll be like, hey, I wonder what's going on in Nebula.
Right.
And I'll go and scroll back and see what people have posted. And I did have the idea to post something about Carnival, but a Colombian guy beat me to it. And I thought it would be weird. He just posted about Carnival in Colombia and I'd come and post about Carnival in Trinidad.
Yes.
But I did have a conversation with my boss about it in one of our one-on-one sessions. Because, and this is one of the things that I found to be really helpful when it comes to remote work, is communicating.
Yes.
You have to be a really good communicator, because being a remote worker requires you to be very communicative, very responsive.
Yes.
You have to actually over communicate because people need to know that you're there, that you're online, that you're available. Right. And so I've kind of lost my train of thought.
That's okay. You over communicate and you need to be a good communicator.
You need to over communicate. Oh, right. And just dealing with my boss again and knowing the work culture. I remember one time we had a one-on-one and she asked me the same two questions.
Right.
How is work? How is life?
Right. And
I tend to be a little cagey about sharing life because, I like to keep personal and work separate. So I said, everything. I didn't have any issues or challenges work-wise that I needed to address. So I said, well, work is fine. Everything's okay. And, life is good. Life is okay. And I thought, it's not enough. I can't just leave it as a 2-minute meeting, right? So I said, well, in Trinidad, it's the carnival season. So I told her all about what was currently going on with carnival. It turns out that she loves steel pan.
Oh, wow.
She said ever since she was a little girl, she's always loved the sound of steel pan. At the time, I was learning to play pan.
Okay.
And so I told her about that, So we had this, this nice little conversation about Carnival and what was going on. And she said, I want to see pictures. Well, I never showed her pictures, but she wanted to see, she was really excited about
Yes.
it. And I thought it was really important that engaging
Yes.
and that connection was really important. And say, well, yeah, life is good, work is fine.
Yeah.
And leave it at that, because you have to make a real effort to develop relationships with your colleagues when it's remote and you don't see each other.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, another thing about the work culture is, with my previous job, they insisted that you be on camera for meetings.
Okay.
This one, I have never seen my boss, what she looks like in person.
Okay.
You have your little profile pic.
Right.
She has a profile pic on Slack.
Right.
That's all I see. I think, no, I've seen one colleague. He has since left. And the only reason I saw what he looked like, I suggested, because personally, I like to be on camera. I want to see people. I want to see who I'm talking to.
I think that's a Trinidadian thing, because I think so, because I know a lot of companies ask for it, but I feel like it's how we communicate. We communicate with our hands a lot, things like that.
Yes.
And I find it very uncomfortable when I'm on camera and somebody else is off camera. And
what is that?
I don't like that. It's very uncomfortable.
It's either everyone is off or everyone is on.
But even when I go off just to match them, it just feels weird, because I'm just talking to a blank screen. Yes. And I feel like that connection is lacking. And it's like you said, I totally agree with you. Creating connections in remote work and remote work spaces is very important, because it's one of the things you don't have in your everyday life. It's not like you can look over and talk to somebody in a cubicle next to you. You really have to create that connection with people who will check up on you and check in with you to make sure you're okay. It really is about fostering relationships the best way you can digitally, I believe. Yeah.
So when I first started, at one point I suggested, hey, that we do an on-camera meeting. But my boss was like, well, not everybody likes to be on camera. So, if you want to, you don't want to. Well, by the time you start that, I know, okay, I'm not going to bother. So we start the meeting. Nobody's on camera. And this guy, because the last thing he heard was me saying, hey, how about on camera? He comes on with his camera on.
Okay.
So we all see him. He doesn't see us. And then he's like, wait, I thought this was an on-camera meeting. Y'all made me put my camera on. So then he takes his camera off, right? So yeah, that I still would prefer that. But we don't really have. My team, we meet once a month for an end of month meeting on the last Wednesday of the month, off camera. And then we have our twice a month one-on-ones with the manager. And that meeting is usually anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes.
Right.
And that's it.
Okay.
However, we have a once a quarter all hands, the entire organization, well, supposed to be, meeting. And that is camera optional. But the head of HR who runs the meeting, she's always on camera.
Right.
The CEO, if he joins, and the second in command, they are on camera. So the leadership tends to be on camera.
Yes.
And for the rest, but it's camera optional.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that opportunity to go on camera.
Yes.
And to kind of see everybody go through it and say, oh, this is what this one looks like, because everyone, you just know the name.
Yes.
If you have to liaise with them for work or whatever, but you get to see what they look like. And then even when they have profile pictures, that could be 10 years old.
Yeah, sometimes it's a profile pic of their dog or something. And I'm like, I don't know how to connect with you over this. I'm so sorry. I really don't know how to connect with you over this, But going back to what you said about being a good communicator, all right? Mm-hmm. What do you think are other crucial skills or qualities that a remote worker should have in your industry or otherwise?
So we've covered communication, discipline, time management is big, of course. The ability to work independently.
Yes.
Because not everybody can do that.
No.
Some people need a little prodding.
Yes.
or regular meetings, regular check-ins to sort of keep them
On track.
motivated. And that's the thing. That's another thing. You have to be self-motivated.
Agreed.
Right? Because nobody's going to be checking on you. Deborah, did you finish XYZ project? Are you working on the, like, no, nobody is checking. They will check if you don't deliver what you're supposed to deliver. And by that time, it might be kind of late, particularly in instances where, like in my case, I am an independent contractor. And what that means is I am not an employee.
Right.
And what that means is, for any reason, according to the stipulations in my contract, either party can terminate the contract with no notice at any time for any reason.
Yes.
Right? And so, you know, you kind of don't have a lot of job security in a sense.
Yes.
You're not going to get a second chance, I think, if, you know, you do something heinous, do something wrong, don't deliver, consistently don't deliver. It's just going to be, okay, we'll get somebody else.
Yes.
Thank you. That's it. That's it. So that's really important. I think it's also important to be adaptable.
Agreed.
Because of what I mentioned about different work cultures, different people that you're dealing with from different countries.
Yes.
Because in Trinidad, you're dealing with a Trini, you kind of know what you're going to get.
Yes.
You know how we operate. Anything is anything. We kind of, you know, very laissez-faire in some instances. But you need to be able to read the room.
Yes.
And adapt.
Agreed. I agree.
And that can be, you could be doing the same job, but it's a different employer. You have to adapt to that employer. You have to adapt to that manager.
Yeah.
You know, that person from a different country. Sometimes something that has come up has been the language barrier. Okay. Now, everybody is supposed to be fluent in English, at least in my organization and the previous ones I've worked with. But for a lot of people, English is their second language.
Yes.
So sometimes things
get lost in translation.
And I think it's important to be tolerant, but also understanding when these kinds of things happen. It can be frustrating. But yeah, this is what happens when you're dealing with people. You're dealing with all kinds of different people from all over the world.
Yes.
And these are the things you're going to have to deal with.
Agreed. I totally agree with that because the company I worked with before was primarily Latin American. This one is primarily American, and it is a lot of adapting to the different cultures, you know. And it does take some time to get used to it, you know, because there is a lot of nuances that come along with different cultures that you have to pick up. But it's also one of the great things I think about being a remote worker. The ability to meet so many people without having to leave home. It is one of the, I think it's one of the advantages of being a remote worker. I quite enjoy that experience because I get to meet people I would have never gotten to meet having an office job, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And before, so I spent quite a few years living abroad.
Right.
And I was an expat for a while, and I basically am getting a little taste of the expat experience again without actually having to leave Trinidad.
That is true. That is true. And I just want to ask you one thing I think a lot of my listeners would like to know is, what advice would you give someone who is looking to become a remote worker or just starting out on their remote work journey? What is the one thing you wish you knew before you started this journey?
I mean, I have some advice,
of course,
but that question about what's the one thing, that's a good question. And I'd have to give that some thought. What I wish I knew? But in terms of advice, so my background is communications. I was basically a communications generalist.
Right.
So my last office job was as not the last one, but the penultimate one, was as a communications coordinator. And in that role, I was responsible for the company website, managing social media, which included email marketing, social media
Right.
marketing, content marketing. And that's where I got my taste of content,
Right.
doing content work. And after coming out of that job, when I decided, I think I want to focus on digital marketing and sort of pivot in that direction, I decided to upskill. And so I did look for courses online, free courses online. And I did courses in digital marketing, social media marketing, content marketing, digital strategy, that sort of thing.
Right.
So I think that is really important to have those qualifications. And it's so easy nowadays to get to find free courses. I used HubSpot.
Right.
HubSpot has tons of free courses and they are recognized in the industry. So that is one thing I did. I also use LinkedIn. Now, of late, I've been seeing a lot of people have been ragging on LinkedIn. I've seen a lot of posts, TikTok and Instagram, where people are saying, don't even bother with those LinkedIn job posts. Don't bother with job boards. They're a waste of time. And I'm like, I have had all of my jobs I've gotten through LinkedIn and these job boards. So I do not agree. I think LinkedIn is your friend.
Yes.
I would advise anybody to do some research online and optimize your LinkedIn profile.
Yes.
Do set up your job search so that you get the notifications for the specific roles that you're interested in. And again, the remote job boards, there's one in particular that I have used. Actually, my last 2 jobs, they were posted on LinkedIn, and this particular job board is called Dynamite Jobs.
Okay.
And it's one of the remote work job boards. And both of my last 2 jobs were posted there. So I can't speak bad about LinkedIn or the job boards because I have been successful with both of them.
I can't speak bad about LinkedIn either. I've found LinkedIn to be such a great resource, just even for content, for the podcast, but also just, daily motivation. You have to curate the algorithm, basically. It's like using Facebook. I honestly call LinkedIn corporate Facebook because it is, it's about creating a space for yourself, your feed, your notifications, all of those things that are geared towards you and where you are at. So I find LinkedIn to be very helpful. And I do think optimizing your LinkedIn profile, but also making sure if you're you want to be a remote worker, it's optimized to be a remote worker. And I think that's something that we miss a lot in the Caribbean, or we tend to I think we're now coming into how important LinkedIn is and optimizing LinkedIn. So if you are looking for a remote job, you can't just do a LinkedIn profile and think, okay, that's it. It has to state that I have the skills that a remote worker should have, because that's what people are looking for.
Yeah. Some people, I've realized, they just use it as a place to have a digital, and sometimes it's not even fully done, but a digital resume.
Yes.
Right? You just have your work experience and your qualifications up, and that's it.
Yes.
And like any of, as you said, as you talked about the algorithm, like any social media, you need to engage.
Yes.
You need to have a real presence. You need to post. I'm actually talking to myself right now because I really would like to be more active on LinkedIn. I used to be when I had an office job. I don't know. I do it less now, but I would like to engage more.
Yes.
But in addition to, and by engaging, I mean not just posting, but you want to join groups. You want to follow the right people. So I, basically my niche is content writing, content editing, copywriting. I follow people.
Yes, I do as well.
Who are in that field.
Yes.
Especially people who post a lot, who have a lot of relevant and useful content. I follow these people. And I think at one point they also courses.
Yes,
I mean,
they are.
it's such a great resource that people really sleep on LinkedIn. I have to say, I have friends who, I remember I had a conversation with a friend of mine. He had been out of work, and I said, "Oh, okay. So are you on LinkedIn? What field are you in?" He said he was in IT. I said, "Okay, are you on LinkedIn? Because I see a lot of jobs on LinkedIn, mostly tech jobs on LinkedIn." And he said, "Well, I have an account, but," and that was it. I said, "Are you serious? This was last day. I'm like, in 2024, you're not on LinkedIn. You have an account, but you're not actually on LinkedIn."
Yeah.
I said, you're not serious."
Yes.
Clearly, you're not serious. And when I told him about my remote job, he said, "Oh, that would be great." I said, "Well, I got it on LinkedIn." And he said he thought remote jobs were only for people in the US and the UK.
And that's another thing that people tend to not think about, especially in the Caribbean and Latin America. You tend to think you see US only a lot, and it discourages you. You have to go in and set your job alerts properly. There are job boards specific to the Caribbean and Latin America.
Yes. So I think a lot of people need to know that Latin America includes the Caribbean.
Yes.
So don't look at Latin America and think, "Oh, I have to know Spanish. I have to be from a Spanish." No, the Caribbean is included. And that is something that I think I got this job because I get notifications about jobs in Latin America. And unless they specifically say that they're looking for people located in Colombia,
specific
Chile,
country,
Argentina, blah, 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 it says Latin America, that means you.
That means you, yes. That is true. And that is something I find, having conversations with people, they're like, I feel like a lot of people fail LinkedIn, like it's this big platform that they're not familiar with. And like you said, there's so many courses, free courses. There's the University of YouTube, all of those things that you can go on and find ways to learn about them, to break it down, to make it a little more user-friendly to yourself. You can even use tools like ChatGPT to come up with a learning plan on how to use LinkedIn to maximize the potential of your profile, all of those things. There's so many tools that, like you say, we sleep on. And I honestly think that is one of the things in this area of the world we sleep on, because we don't know how to use it, and we don't value what it can actually do for us. I see like a lot of my co-workers, like they're on LinkedIn, they post on LinkedIn every day, twice a day. They're working to become top voices on LinkedIn, because you're trying to become an industry leader and show others that you are in fact very knowledgeable about a topic, and it's something very easy to do. It's not difficult.
I think one of the things that keeps us back in Trinidad, and again, it's a cultural thing, we do not see the value of networking.
Agree.
Networking is so important and so valuable, but we're not big on networking in Trinidad.
Agreed.
Right? And I think that LinkedIn is simply an online networking tool. And so that, because that's not in our culture, in our business culture, it's something that you have to kind of get used to.
Yes.
And it also feels like you're putting yourself out there, because in a sense, you're putting your resume and your work history. And some people don't want people to know their business. Social media is one thing, but they're like, unless they are actively job hunting.
Yes.
Some people just think it's for job hunting. And unless they are actively job hunting, they don't see the value.
That's
right.
True.
They're like, well, I'm on Facebook. That's enough social media for me, right?
What comes out of networking, and I think this is something that a lot of people don't, and I have seen the value of it for myself, is referrals. Because someone who knows you and knows your ability and knows that you're looking for a job, or has a job that they know your skills can line up with.
Yes.
You can get referred. And the power of a referral is 10 times more than sending in your resume by
Absolutely.
itself, you know?
Yes.
There
yes.
is such great power in networking, using LinkedIn, getting referrals, becoming a leader in whatever space you're in, you know, because it opens up doors for you, whatever
Yes.
that door may be. May not necessarily be a job, but it may be other things, speaking engagements, all of those
Yes.
things
yes. And I know of people, and again, when there isn't enough testimonials, I feel like, out there. I remember having a conversation with someone and they're like, well, do people even really get jobs? Do people even really? And I was like, yes, I have a friend, my same friend I freelanced with in St. Lucia. She had her 2 companies in St. Lucia. And because of LinkedIn, she got an investor from Dubai.
Right. Yeah.
He was looking to get, so there's citizenship by investment in
Right.
St. Lucia. He was interested in getting himself a St. Lucian passport. He went on LinkedIn and sort of, found her, and they established a working relationship. He came to St. Lucia. She assisted him in his attempt to get his St. Lucian passport. And he decided to invest in her company.
Yeah.
And he became a shareholder in her company.
So there's so much power in putting yourself out there, and it is something that is hard to do. I will admit it took me a while to put myself out there as well. You know, even doing this podcast, it is putting myself out there, putting my experiences out there. And when we met, I talked about it, and it took me some months to get it done. But it's great to try. You have to try, and it's been so rewarding doing this and seeing the community that's being developed out of it. I think that's one of the things that I appreciate, especially as you say, remote work is isolating. So creating that community within like Trinidad or the Caribbean, Latin America, it's really been very fulfilling, and it does help with that isolation a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the things that I did that I really need some more follow through, but I created a Facebook group.
Okay.
After having that conversation with you about it being isolating, I decided, you know what, I'm going to start a Facebook group for people who work remotely. It's called Remotely. So listeners can look for it and join. The intention was to create that community and to make it less isolating for all of us who work from home and don't have that office camaraderie, people that you could all talk with by the water cooler. And also to even share information on resources like co-working spaces. I think that is something that's kind of slowly ramping up in Trinidad. There aren't a lot of them, but I've been seeing a couple new ones in the past 6 months. And so that would be really great. And, to just basically organize a co-working date.
Yeah.
You can say, hey, you're working from such and such. Let's work from there on Thursday.
Yeah.
And so it's like you have a colleague with you working in this public co-working space. And I think that that's a great idea. So I really need to make more of an effort to get that off the ground and get people, because I think about 8 people have joined. I did it. I got people from Twitter.
Right.
I refuse to call it X. And I'm no longer on it.
Right.
Because I don't agree with that guy. But yeah, it would be great to have. I think initially I may have restricted it a bit because I described it as being for people who work remotely for non-local companies.
Right.
But I think it would be helpful for anyone who works from home primarily.
Right.
Even if you might be a freelancer, you might be an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't necessarily just have to be for people who work remotely for a foreign employer.
Right. So of course, thank you for sharing that. And I will definitely link it under our interviews so that other people can find it and join.
Excellent.
And, we can create that remote work from home, work from anywhere community. That would really, I think, just be a great place to network and grow together and learn together, most importantly, because that's what you
Yes.
need out of the community that you
Absolutely.
have. So I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come on my podcast and give your experiences. I really appreciate it. And I will definitely have you back on, when
Thank you.
later on when we get everything sorted. And
Yes.
we might go on video next time. So.
Oh, awesome.
All
Well,
right.
this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun to break up my workday a little bit. This has been great, and hopefully we can do more of this and more collaboration.
Of course.
as remote workers.
Thank you so much. So
You're welcome, Sasha.
no problem. So listeners, I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, please feel free to put in the comments and we'll be sure to answer.